Hello and welcome to another episode of Page Burners. We're working our way through the Malazan books by Stephen Erikson and Ian Esselmont. We're currently on Memories of Ice. We read approximately 100 odd pages every week from whatever edition of the book we are using. Today's discussion is going to be chapters 15, 16, and 17. My name is Varsha. I run the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain, where I post these episodes and some other podcast episodes when I remember to. Um, and we also go around and discuss what we are most excited to talk about each week. So today, I would like to discuss about how Cruel is controlling all the events, every single thing, and so on and so forth. And Dan is here with a very interesting name that I want him to explain. So he'll go next.
What's there to explain?
Actually,
What
I
is-
don't.
I don't know. I think we may get blacklisted off the internet if he, or actually we may
Dan just wants some hugs. He just
Yeah,
wants hugs.
exactly.
So it's fine.
I crave that nurturing love that the matron is showing talk. You know?
Okay.
Well, anyways. Well, I mean, that part is something that I did want to discuss just because of how weird, creepy and weird. And I don't know, like a bit like also I felt a bit sad. I felt sad for the matron too, even though she's like a monster. So it was like a very mixed feeling sort of section, which was interesting to me. But yeah, we're gonna get to it.
Yes, we'll get to it. And mortal sort of brand.
That's you, Shannon.
Did you forget what name you gave yourself?
Oh, sorry. My name's Shannon, and I am most excited to talk about probably most of chapter 16 and all the Grace Award stuff, the death of Ricalian and Carnidus, just all that. Like I really dug that chapter.
And
next is
me, Carl. I am Carl, and I am most excited to talk about the chapter I didn't read, which is chapter 17. No, I'm kidding. I mean, I'm not joking about having not read it. I didn't read it. Unfortunately, I bad scheduling on my part. But I think the thing I'm actually most excited to talk about is Ikovian, because I feel like this is where I really got attached to him on my first read through. There's just something very, I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that for now.
Yes, sounds good. Lots to talk about. Lots happens in these chapters. We get more information about the wagon and Dragnipur, and all of this ties forward. I just wish I had remembered all of that when I read the later books. Anyway, dialing way back down, we start with the Rivi camp and Whiskey Jack and Corlat. I forget what they were doing though.
Speaking of,
Oh.
Did you do your homework? Can you tell
I
us
did
how they
not.
fell in love?
I did not. I will. That'll be a long project that I will get to eventually, but will give you answers.
If you've ever seen those like on like Instagram reels or like TikTok, the like fan cams for couples, that's like there are these really like glitzy, glossy, like that's what we're gonna get. Like Varsha and Mirka are gonna create a fan cam for Whiskey Jet and Corlat.
Yeah, but it'll be a long project. Oh, we lost Shannon again. Okay, I have
Very
to
scholarly.
But yes, it's going to take a while, but it will come. I had a busy week last week, so I didn't get to it. I don't promise that I'll get to it this week, but eventually you'll get answers. Maybe. I don't
Certainly,
know. I don't know what I'm signing up for.
Yeah, might take you a while to find the two sentences that foreshadow it.
Yes. But 2 sentences, they could be 2 powerful sentences, Just saying. There are some powerful ones that I underlined in the chapters we read today. So who's to say those don't work as well? Well, they clearly worked on me.
I actually did feel like it was kind of interesting reading Whiskey Jack's internal monologue and their dynamic here. Like I was more compelled by it than I had been, which is vaguely how I remember it happening the first time too, where I was like, oh, that came out of nowhere. I guess this is kind of interesting though. I don't know that I'm like feeling a lot with him, but like I should say I guess I'm feeling a little more for like the Whiskey Jack side of the equation because we are in his POV. And so like hearing his insecurities, I think is very like he's afraid of saying too much and like latching onto her too quickly, too tightly. And I think that is very human and very interesting. And I wish I just cared more about the relationship overall because I think it would make it even more powerful. But I thought that stuff was well written. So
what I heard is you're coming around and they're a great couple.
We can go with that, sure.
So so I did remember where we started. We started with Silver Fox just chilling with a bunch of undead wolves, and they are there now, and she, like, I guess they find her just hanging out with them, right? And then she says not to tell her mom about these and that they need to be out of sight. Then Corlat wants more information from Whiskey Jack because she seems to think that he knows things about Silver Fox that he's not sharing, and vice versa. There's also some Kaladin Brood Kalor exchange.
Oh yeah, that was a sick scene when Kalor like created a new mountain range, or not Kalor,
Kaladin Brood.
Yes. Call them when their names are so similar. Damn you, Steve! Damn you!
Yes.
That was awesome.
Kaladin Brood.
I totally forgot that happened. We've kind of been waiting on that because there's been a lot of talk about how scary his hammer is, and it did make me kind of take a step back and remember that like these people just found out that Byrne is dying. Like Quickbin, for whatever reason, has not told anyone that, which I don't understand. He's a very enigmatic person. He keeps things close to the vest, but it just seems like that might be something worth mentioning, at least to like Whiskey Jack, but I guess not.
Yeah. That's interesting. Why is he keeping that secret? It's not something that he can handle on his own. But I think there is an element of this being an overwhelming piece of information, right? Maybe he doesn't want to burden the others with that knowledge. I thought he
didn't have time yet to tell them because they're in different places right now and they can't use the warrants, so maybe they can't communicate. So I thought that was...
He found out all the way at the beginning, though.
But I thought they were already separated then, or were they not? I thought the bridge burners were doing their own thing already from the beginning of the book, sort of. They separated right at the beginning.
Perrin. I mean, I guess to be fair, maybe you don't tell Perrin, who has stress ulcers, about that the planet is dying. That might be a reasonable call, but it still feels like that's info that he's like made like weird magical FaceTime with fucking Capustan. Like why can't he do that with Whiskey Jack and team? I mean, to me the only explanation is he willfully is not telling them, and then the question is, why is he not telling them?
Didn't he do that FaceTime thing while he was with Whiskey Jack and Dujek and the others?
Yes, he did.
Oh, he did. Okay.
And that was after he had visited Burns' people. But what was interesting, first of all, that was an interesting image, right? It felt a bit like a volcanic eruption, the stuff oozing out of the earth, but it's blood in some form,
Yeah.
and it seems to be Burns' blood, right? But it's tainted by poison, and the poison has the taint of the warren of chaos, apparently, which is interesting because that seems to be what the crippled god is leveraging to infect all the warrens.
Absolutely. I also just love that the actual scene itself, or you know, the context for why that happens, which is Krupp just trolling basically everyone, but in this instance specifically Kaladin Brood. And
Oh yeah.
amidst the hammer blow, he's just standing on this little island. And it's just, Krupp is the best. I don't know how you can't like this guy. He's such a fucking like, he acts like a moron, but he is super smart and seemingly incredibly powerful, but not all powerful. But he's playing everyone on their strings, and yet he's like compassionate. He's just a great character. Like, he just has so much going on. It's just really fantastic. I do feel a little bit strange about, I forget who it was, Whiskey Jack or whoever, being like, he might be the smartest man on the planet. I'm like, that's a big assumption to make. Like, there are a lot of people on the planet, but that's also kind of a classic like fiction thing, right? Like, if you read comic books, like they like rank people on how intelligent they are, and I'm like, that's not how intelligence works. Like, but anyway, that's a nitpick. That's a nitpick. I love Krupp is the point of, you know, all of that.
Yeah. I love that. When he's compassionate, you get the sense that he's clowning most of the time, right? But when he was talking to I think some soldiers who are protecting the Maib or something, his voice changed in quality. I think it was lower and deeper. So you get the sense that this is something that he's taking seriously, or even, I mean, everything he does, I think he does take seriously, even though he's jesting about it. But there is a certain quality of like, he also wants to be seen taking this serious. He doesn't even want to give off the impression that he's making fun in this situation. So yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm.
Magnanimous Krupp's appetites are nothing to make jest of.
Oh,
it's a very serious matter.
I love the scene where he's running off from the mod irregular tent with sticky buns, and we get a whole backstory about how when they run out of ammunition, they start throwing sticky buns at the Malazans. and was it Picker and Blend, or I forget who those two women are. I don't think they were Picker and Blend,
No.
but of course not. Those are with Paran. But they yeah, like they don't taste the same without bits of forest.
Too bad we haven't gotten someone from the mod regulars, because they seem like a fun group too to have like a character from.
Yeah, true. They are. I feel like did we not meet like one of them come in on a meeting or something? I feel like maybe not. I don't know. It doesn't matter. The point being that they're not one of the like, you know, main cast, which certainly that would be seemingly a lot of fun.
Their name has the word irregulars in them.
Yeah.
They have to be fun. Feels like a necessity.
Absolutely. They're like a Douglas Adams like group of characters, or like a Terry Pratchett group of characters. They just have that like goofy, almost like satirical sense about them, and yet they exist in this horribly, I mean, God, some like really bleak stuff happens in these chapters.
Yeah. So the bun stuff happens in this chapter too, right? I guess everybody is trying to find out what the others know. So Whiskey Jack and Cola trying to exchange information, Krupp wanting to see who's guarding the Maib, and they all want to know which part of Silver Fox is currently in charge of her consciousness. We get a chilling answer uh, towards the end of chapter 17, or was it 16? I think it was 17. But
It was 17, and I see what you did there.
right. Thank you. Thank you. I
good.
was
That was
hoping
good.
you would notice. But yeah, anything? Yeah.
Yeah, I love the Mibe stuff. I just think that, like, you start the book and she is insanely compassionate and frankly, like, selfless for her situation.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of where when I first read this, like, I expected the story to go, and he really doesn't. Erikson doesn't try to soften the edges. Like, she is miserable and is lashing out at everyone because of it, and you can't help but just feel really bad for her. It's I'm making connections now as I'm talking through this, that she's almost like a version of the matron, or the matron is a version of her, right? Where you have these two mother figures. I mean, clearly this book is interested in motherhood and the cost of it. And, the Mibes issue is that, it's literalizing the cost of motherhood, right? That you're, like, literally giving parts of yourself, and, to a leech is a really ungenerous way of putting it. And then, the matron is kind of the end of the story, where the kids leave the nest, and you're all alone and you're sad. And so you get a new fake son that you crush quite literally to your breast.
Oh, is that her supposed son?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you didn't get that. Yeah.
I completely misread that, if that is the case.
Yeah.
It says how she basically treats her like a baby, right? She licks him clean and right.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. So where I went with that is okay, I don't even know how this would be biologically possible, but that's where I went. Somebody at some point says that she needs a male partner to produce more babies, and I was like, okay, maybe that's what she's using talk for.
I don't think so.
I don't think it works like that.
No.
Yeah, it's that.
As much as Dan has made that name his name, which I would think we should just never tell the audience. Like, I think we should just leave them to speculate what Dan's name is. Yeah. Just that it's about the matron, and we'll leave it at that. But as much as Dan may have named himself that, I think it is this, like, child, like a dolly sort of situation. Like, oh, here's my little boy, and she's, like, senile and crushing him. And I mean, in many ways, it's actually like the reverse of the Mibe situation, where the Mibe's, like, victimized by motherhood, and the matron is this, like, embodiment of how motherhood can be crushing, literally, right? That it can, victimize people, children, or surrogate children in this case.
I also assume she probably thinks he is also changed him all that, so probably more sturdy than he actually is.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. See, he's got the old, like, bird bones in comparison.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
Right? But
it
is involved that the matron has this, how to say, like, mother's sort of nurturing thing, which I would more associate with mammals as opposed to reptiles. But it is interesting. I just wonder how it works in their society, I guess, because it's she lays eggs. I don't know. She lays eggs? Probably,
yeah.
Like a lizard, I guess. And then I don't know, because if she's the matron of the whole, like, it's more like an ant thing. If she's like creating every other, how can she get attached to any single one of them when she's, basically birthing a million children in her lifetime or more. I wonder.
And the first generation she births is warriors, right? Because they are the ones with the swords for arms. So it can't be a very nurturing society in that, if that is the case.
I wonder.
You definitely get the sense that they are very cold as a species. And yet there is, as Dan, you pointed out, this nurturing element. I had never, I think I had like kind of recognized that, but hadn't really like fully thought it through. It is strange. And I don't know, what it says about either her as an individual or presumably the society as a whole. I mean, because she does fulfill a very mammalian role, seemingly. Although
because she's so alone now, like there's no one literally.
I mean, she is sapient, so she's not like, it's not like a complete hive mind situation.
Yeah, true.
Although there does seem to be some sort of like connection between all of them. I don't know.
And she was also the one who was holding Mon together until Kilava accidentally set the jagged children there, right?
Yeah. Oh, true. I think we get like backstory in these chapters, right? Didn't we? Because doesn't Calor like basically give us the whole history of?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So she did it voluntarily. She was trapped in that rift voluntarily, or was it like an accident? I don't remember that.
It was an accident, although she was intentionally creating the rent.
Okay. Yeah.
She is the one who created the rent. It was part of the.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on her motivation, or at least what Calor said her motivation was, which is important, right? We always need to like take a step back and think, these are unreliable narrators. What they say is not necessarily the factual truth, but I think we can take a lot of this knowledge as close to the truth, accurate, in other words. And yeah, for whatever reason, seemingly the matron specifically and the Kachain Chamal and Morn in general decided to open a rent into chaos, and she got herself trapped.
Maybe she needed it to control like the short tails or something.
That's what it was, wasn't it?
Okay.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. That's right, because they revived the short tails, and the short tails were uncontrollable.
Yeah. Why did they revive the short tails?
Because they could.
Oh, okay. I mean, he doesn't say.
They Jurassic Parked themselves.
Right, I was gonna say they had their own Jurassic Park movie, except they're also dinosaurs.
That's actually crazy. We have to get Erikson back, because now I have to ask him if he intentionally had the Kachain Chamal Jurassic Park themselves. Like, that's insane. That's what they did. Oh my god.
Well, it depends how they brought them back. Did they bring them back in like a time portal or some other thing? I wonder.
No, it's genetic engineering.
Oh, was
100%
it? Okay.
Genetic engineering. All that's like their whole thing, is like they're scientists.
Oh, true.
They got all this tech.
Yes. And Calor said he found a lot of Kachain Chamal technology on his continent, right? So nuclear weapons.
Oh, true. Maybe that's how he got that power to destroy everything. Maybe he found nuclear weapons that the Kachain Chamal made and used those. I believe that.
Yeah, that honestly is a really reasonable theory, I think. I mean, that like it has to be something like that. If he did it personally, like he had to literally use nukes or the equivalent, the magical equivalent, because like that dude cannot just like wave his hands and kill a continent. Yeah. He's just not built that way.
I mean, it's not the first time we've seen nukes in a fantasy setting.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, it's the second time.
Yeah, this group we have encountered it before. And the first time had no idea what was going on. And I think, Dan, you had to explain what it was because it was so confusing.
It was very confusing.
Yes. I think, did I even get it by the time you started describing it as a mushroom cloud? I don't know.
No, it took you a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took so long. He really doled that one out. And if anyone wants to, any
Don't
I'm
say
sure,
which series.
yeah, I'm not gonna say. I actually want to spoil
No.
it, but
Yeah.
I just thought it was kind of obvious once I said a couple of things. I thought, oh well, these guys know it.
you
No,
had
Dan,
seen-
it wasn't.
yeah.
There are so many
Or
clues.
I'm super dumb. One of the probably the latter. But
Anyways,
sorry, I wanna check on Shannon if we can
Mhm.
hear him. Can you say something? No, you're muted.
Something.
Excellent.
Hey,
nice.
Yay.
he's alive.
All right, camera's down. Mic is working. I guess I'm back.
Yes. Don't try to start your camera again.
Yeah, definitely don't do that.
No.
Hmm. Cool. We were just talking about what were we talking about? Crap.
Sounds like you were in
And
16 or 15.
yes, 15.
That sounds like you were in chapter 15.
Yeah, we were talking about a lot of things. The Kachanchamal and Calor and Nightchill and her Tiran Eye. Do you have anything to discuss in chapter 15?
Well, with all these technical issues, luckily I was kind of down on chapter 15. No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Since we were already on the subject a little bit, Dan, do you want to discuss your matron and talk relationship? I think that's the beginning of the next chapter anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we already discussed it a bit
Mm-hmm.
with the whole, her mother feeling and how she, like it does feel sad for her too, because she doesn't look, she's like crazy. She's not crazy, but her mind is gone. I don't know how to describe it. She's not insane, but she's not completely there, right? I mean, it's been so long, and apparently when you're stuck in that rift, you're basically being tortured the whole time. So that probably didn't help things. And then is she undead? She's undead, right?
I
I'm
think
not sure,
she
actually.
might
Maybe
be
not.
alive.
Okay.
I think she might be alive, but then there was a barrow right near the rent, which
Okay.
wait, but then oh no, I think she might be undead too, because it's a soul that is trapped there, and we know something clawed its way out of the barrow. So I don't know if it was her and her children, or if it was
It
just
was the matron.
it was
No,
the
they-
matron, right?
They
Yeah.
say that. They explicitly say it was the
Okay.
matron who clawed
Okay.
out.
So she is undead. The soul. But I assume the other undead don't have the soul. They're just like bodies or whatever.
Is
Well,
she
she
undead?
is actually.
I don't know that she's undead.
Well, I mean, I guess it depends. I don't know what's trapped in the chaos rent. Is it her soul or her body? I guess we don't know. Because if it's only the soul, then maybe the soul went back to the body, which was dead or whatever.
I think it's both. I mean, think about
Okay.
the last book, Deadhouse Gates. We were kind of led to believe when the Talani Mass pulled the ultimate fake out, and that he was just going to like disappear up in another chaos rent. And it not so coincidentally, when the little Jagged baby gets thrown in the rent, that frees her physically, the matron. So my guess would be both.
That makes sense. But yeah, but it's been like thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of years since, she was alive the first time, I guess. So there's a lot of, it's a sad situation for her. Like your whole race is there. You're literally the last remaining member of your race. I don't know. How would you feel if you were the last remaining member of the human race alone on Earth or something, and it's full of aliens? It would, yeah. I don't know. I just find, even though she's a monster,
yeah.
Even though she's a monster, she's also a very sad situation.
Absolutely. No, she's tragic.
And she's being just puppeteered basically by this Jagged now.
Well, she's crazy. I mean, she's like explicitly like she's gone mad with grief.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Her whole civilization, all her children are dead or they're like zombie weapons. And I don't know. It's unclear to me if, I guess she's aware of that.
Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know actually. Maybe
I mean,
she is subconsciously, but she doesn't want to think of, or like the grief shields her from the, all that sort of stuff. Who knows what's going on in that tiny little brain? But oh, mate, I just assumed because I think lizards have tiny brains.
yeah,
Who
T-Rexes,
knows?
right, famously have like little brains. But I don't know if you can build these like super advanced cities and nuclear weapons with tiny brains.
True.
Take
Good
it up
point.
with Oppenheimer, okay?
Oh, I took too long to make that connection.
I'm talking about the Kachain Shamal Oppenheimer, inventor of the nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
Yes. I lost connection briefly, but did you talk about why she was in the barrow? Why she had to dig her way out if she was physically blocking the rent?
I don't know. Maybe it was just the other change about if it came out of the barrows. Who knows? Or the rent maybe is underground.
No,
Yeah.
they definitely said it was her. Like they explicitly. I mean, they could be wrong, but it just seems like a weird thing to lie about or to get wrong in the story. I do remember though they like explicitly they use she, like it was all very mysterious. Like she like crawled out and you don't want to like confront her or like something like that.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe it was. Maybe no. I think now that we're talking about this, I do think maybe it was her soul in the rent, and her body was buried under, like in the barrow, and then the soul came back and filled her body, and now she's out.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it makes sense that she dug her way out, because what else took 300,000 years if she was just released and she could roam the world, right?
True.
And I think it's implied that the barrows were dug out recently. So she took all that time to claw her way out, get all her other undead children to claw out, and now
Is it
she's
implied
sad.
that maybe it's like Calor's sort of digging that sort of started uncovering these and then enabled the matron to get out? I don't know. I just thought about it because he did say they did excavate a lot of these like change the mallet barrows. So I wonder if that facilitated her coming out.
We can hear you now, Shannon. By the way, you're back, resurrected from the barrow. Yeah, no, I mean that's an interesting point, Dan. That like he's probably not likely to be like, yeah, I dug too deep, like the dwarves in Lord of the Rings and resurrected the Balrog. Like that's probably not like high on his list of things to brag about. So
yeah,
it's very possible.
And also, the other thing that I was kind of quite interested about this section about Calor explaining was because he does a whole explanation saying like, they could change the Malay where to be jagged, like the jagged where to be planimas or something like that. And then like he does a whole history of what happened. And while I was reading it, and then I think Silver Fox was replying to, about the jagged stuff and stuff like that. And I kept thinking, like, this does not make the Planimass cause much better. Like, it seemed to make it worse. Because she was saying, like, oh, not all of them were bad. Many of them were fighting against the tyrant too, right? And I was like, so why are you just killing literally everyone just in case?
Yes.
Just so it's impossible? I don't know. It seemed, the way she was trying to justify it seemed very... I don't know. It made me side more with the jagged.
Yeah, it was a flaky explanation, right? She's claiming that they waged war so that the current generation of humans, who presumably came from some of the Imas and could live, but there's no indication that if they had just let the jagged live minus the tyrants, humans would have died out, right? It feels like rationalization, but maybe she's right. I think it's hard to tell. Yeah, I also took that with a big grain of salt.
Well, I mean, it is rational in a sense. Like, it is literally rationalization. And it's like, well, yeah, the only way to guarantee that no jagged tyrant is ever going to rise up and enslave you all is to just kill all the jagged. But that doesn't make it right.
Fair.
You know,
Yeah.
like it's totally morally bankrupt. And I mean, it's the most extreme version of something we see in the real world a lot, which is, very real trauma in a society leads to like outsized violence as a response, And so they, the Talani mass were horribly enslaved and subjugated. And, I'm sure they had parts, like whole groups of their societies wiped out and genocided. And their response was, okay, never again. And never again means we're literally going to kill all of them.
I feel like you would try first to be like, okay, can we have an alliance with the normal guys and try to coexist and then see if that works?
I mean, maybe they did.
Maybe, but she doesn't say it, though. It's never mentioned.
Well, they had enough of an alliance that they teamed up against the tyrants.
I guess, I don't know, it just seemed quick, but maybe like they're just talking about like centuries and millennia in like a couple of sentences, so they have to make it quick, I guess.
Right.
But
yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. Yeah.
Even what you said, like, putting in the context of our current or of our world, and, obviously violence and some injustice leads to some people saying, oh, this ethnic group should be eliminated. But I don't think either side saying that I don't think most people would agree with either side saying that other ethnic group that did a bad thing should be completely eliminated.
I mean, I would agree with that. But I think part of this then gets into the communal aspect of the Talani mass culture, where if you go against the grain, you are completely exiled. Like they are again, I think like we have that. Obviously, there are more and less communal cultures that exist in humanity. But to me, like the Talani mass are like very clearly taking that to the extreme. And in the same way the jagged are taking individualism to the extreme. And so, if you look at like how a lot of like Eastern cultures are, this is like the most extreme version of that, where you do not separate from the main group. If you stand out, you get kicked out at best, if not killed. And so naturally, if they're like kind of the general consensus, probably passed down by their leaders, is like, well, we have to kill them all. And they're like, I guess we'll just kill them all. I mean, to use a very not controversial real world example, like enough like of the Germans just decided, yeah, we'll just like kill all the Jews and, kill all the Romani and like just anyone, in these certain groups, and we'll just wipe them out.
Yeah, but I feel most people would not agree that's the correct solution. That's what I'm saying. I don't think, I think that Talani mass are the villains and the tyrants are the villains, and the jagged that are not tyrants are the only good guys in this whole
I would
situation.
agree with that. Well, but you have exceptions of the Talani mass, where you have Kalava, for example, who is not a genocidal maniac. But I agree with you. Generally speaking, the Talani mass suck. Like, if your like main policy is kill all jagged or kill all insert anything here, I'm not gonna like you very much.
Yeah, that's what I'm just saying Silver Fox doesn't have a good argument in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to sort of fall for it because she almost has you convinced. At least she had me convinced. Like, I'm just gonna stop you a little bit, but I think it goes to show how dangerous that thought process can be, or how what's the word I'm looking for? It's not tempting.
Seductive.
Seductive. Yes, thank you. That's exactly right. How seductive that thought process could be, right? Because what they're basically telling the current humans, you got to live because we did this for you. But that's like an oversimplification of an example would be if a parent snatches something from another child and gives it to them and says, hey, you had a good life because I gave this to you and didn't let this other child have it, right? It feels a bit like that. It's definitely not morally right, and you came up by stepping on an entire other species. It's not something that you would want to be happy about or grateful for, like Silver Fox seems to be demanding that they be.
I think something that's also worth acknowledging is that as complex as their culture was, it was still relatively primitive. So like they were not going to have a lot of like public disagreement, public discourse, it's not like that they're like, we haven't been given any evidence that these were like a real free thinking people, right? Like they kind of just like do what they're told to do. They're the nameless undead horde. And Steve subverts that. Erikson and Esselmont both subvert that, but also like they're playing with it, I think, as like, metaphor made real. But I'm with you. It's a bad argument. I mean, I think it's rational in that like you can understand the steps. It's like it doesn't like the problem is it's just completely immoral. And that's in my mind just like the bottom line is like it's just wrong.
It's just I feel just a very simplistic sort of solution that appeals to the emotions. You're like, oh, just get rid of them, then clean, we're done, it's finished, instead of like a more nuanced thing which would require a lot more work and maybe wouldn't work all the time, but would probably be the more compassionate way.
No, spot on. Right. Nuance is hard. Compassion is hard. It's
we see it in our normal life in politics all the time. It's like, the simple solution is the most appealing because it's simple and you're like, well, that fits with what I want to know. It's very easy to sort of do and think about. Right. So I'll just go with that. But
absolutely.
No, I don't know. Anyways, that's everything that I want to talk about that whole section with the matron and the history, which I thought was quite interesting.
It was. Yeah, that was definitely one of the standouts for me. I guess we can move on to 16.
What happens to 16?
That's the big battle and the death of the Grey Swords. Well, not quite death. They're still hanging on by a thread, but most of them are dead.
Spiritually dead.
Yeah. Yeah, spiritually. That's really true, right? After with Finner falling and everything, like.
Yeah.
So it's very kind of. I don't know if Gnostic is the right word in this scenario, but it's like their god is like on the mortal plane, probably dying. Their cult is on its last legs. Like they're in trouble.
Yeah, and again, like what we discussed last time, I liked that whole ambiguity a bit of like, what's the cause and effect of like Fenner falling from grace and being taken out, and like the fall of the Grey Swords, like because they're connected, right? They're like parallel. One's full, like they're obviously influencing each other. So it's kind of like, is one causing the other, or is just sort of like the universe moving in concert together, And that's kind of like the natural order of things.
I mean, I would think the universe is moving together because we see at the beginning of this book, Trike is ascending.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the last book, we see how Fenner is kind of descending, but that doesn't really happen until, chapter 16, 17 of this book. So...
But it happens at the same time, right? I think they say in this chapter, like, Fenner gets taken out, like, in this chapter, basically. It's happening, taken from his warren, right?
No, I think that there's, like, a rough kind of shape to things with chaos at the edges. I mean, literally, right? And so within that order, it is. It's like it's give and take. And so Fenner falls, Trake rises, the Grey Swords fall, this new cult of Trake rises.
But do you think because Fenner was doomed to be taken out, then also the universe conspired to put the Grey Swords in this position where they would lose the siege and be annihilated? You know what I mean?
Oh, I don't know about that,
I wonder.
but I mean, we know by chapter 17, Fenner is gone.
Yeah.
So he's not in his realm anymore.
Yeah.
So we have Trake really ascending through Gruntle.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have the wolves, Tog and Thanare,
Yes.
out there too. So I do think there is kind of something, I don't know, celestial, like ascending and descending.
Yeah.
But because we do see some deities arising while others are falling.
Yeah. But what would have happened if, like, the Grey Swords were just, camping somewhere while Fenner was taken out? Like, would Fenner have been able to be taken from his warren? Or maybe he was, because he was weakened from all the deaths. So I don't know. I'm just wondering what's the causality over it.
Well, Fenner was taken because of Hiboric, right? In the last
we don't
book.
know exactly how that worked, do we?
Yeah, we know that
We
that
don't
was
know how
the
that
trigger, but I don't think we strictly know if he was the entirety of the reason. Like, I had the
Yeah.
same question too about whether the death of Brucalion, for instance, if that was the thing that allowed Fenner to be brought down to the mortal realm, if that weakened him. Because I think Brucalion says something to the effect that they're even going to be weakening their own god by because of what Rath Fenner did, and it may have weakened him to the point, and I think that's what we are told in Dead House Gates, that something weakened Fenner enough that he could be pulled down by
Right.
the jade thing, which we now know is maybe somewhat tied to the cripple god, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I think that's spot on. I mean, there is a sort of, I don't know if mechanical is the right word, but like there's cause and effect, and we know that the cult of Fenner has been on the downturn for like hundreds, if not thousands of years. Like, they're not what they used to be. That's part of the surprise of the Grey Swords, is like, actually they are really badass, even though Quickben, who has a spirit of a Fenner priest or mage something inside him, thinks that they must be fake, because like Fenner, like, that hasn't been like a serious cult in a long time. And then they this last like bastion of the faith falls by and large, and that weakens the god, and so the god is vulnerable. Some other divine hand reaches out and pulls him down to the planet. I think I want to circle back just a bit to like your question, Dan. I think what you were kind of getting at, of like, it's the universe conspiring to make this thing happen. Because I think this is ultimately a philosophy question as much as it is anything, right? Like, is this universe deterministic?
Yeah.
We see fortune telling, and then the question of free will, and it's like, well, can you have free will in a deterministic universe? Like, can you actually predict the future in a universe that isn't deterministic? Like, all sorts of things like that. And I don't know that there's like a one right answer, although I do kind of know what my opinion about this is. But I think regardless, that there is a very direct line of cause and effect. And actually, I'm just going to say it. I think Malazan is definitely a deterministic universe, although free will certainly, I think, in some form exists. Like, the characters willingly make their actions, but
that's a contradiction, though.
Is it? I see. This is a philosophy conversation. It is like, what's the difference between you consciously making a decision in a moment and, I mean, God, we're going to get back to the baker of it all. I mean, that's what we talked about.
And the manifest delusions of it all.
Yeah.
And maybe the berserk
you're
of it
acted
all.
on by nature and nurture. Like, are you really even free? But is your will free? But,
Well,
I just feel my own belief, and I guess this is a belief, is that if you are conscious and you're consciously making decisions, you have free will. At the same time, if the future is predictable, the future is set in stone, and it's not like we're not given reason, like we're not given the wiggle room that you see in a lot of fantasy stories here, where it's like, oh, the future can change. You have all of these horrible dreams of the future, but like it can change if you're just the right hero, you know? Like that's not what we're given here. It's like, oh no, this is going to happen, and you may not understand what it is you're like foretelling, but like it is going to happen. You know, Finner was going to fall. Drake was going to rise. And so in that sense, I think it is, whether consciously or not, and knowing Erikson and Esselmont, they probably did have conversations about this or think through it. But my reading of the series is as a deterministic universe. And then to me, the more interesting question then is, does free will exist in a deterministic universe, which I would argue it's possible, but again, that's its own can of worms.
I was gonna say, didn't we ask, or somebody, one of you guys asked Erikson directly on this question when we talked to him? And I'm pretty sure he said, yeah, it was predetermined. Like, yeah.
I actually don't remember
which makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, which makes sense what we're seeing.
Him, and yeah, he said, as written, the characters don't have free will.
Okay, there you go.
But I mean, I think I'm gonna not saying I know more than he does, but I feel like he responded sort of the I want to say default answer, right? Because they're written a certain way, and because there's gods manipulating the situation, they don't have free will. But I do feel like there's more to talk about here, despite what he said. Especially because, okay, I think this is a good segue into the thing that I wanted to talk about, the Krul's intense manipulation that I absolutely did not catch during my first read, but the pieces are all there. So we know that I think we have enough at this point to say that Krul's thing seems to be to manipulate things through dreams, right? We first met him in Krupp's dream. That's where Tatasale became Silver Fox. I think there was a dream-ish realm where Talk met Drake, and they found or saw the world through Drake's eyes. And I think there was a conversation between him and Lady Envy where he seems to have a role in Drake's ascendancy. Now, what's not clear to me, and I don't know if this is answered, is whether he's causing Drake's ascendancy, or if he knows that it will happen and is trying to manipulate events around it. I got the sense that he's making the ascendancy happen. And there are some other things too. Oh yeah, also the caravan, the owner of the caravan that Gruntle, etc., are running just happens to be a priest of Krul, right? Of course he does. So the Gruntle's ascendancy, for lack of a better word, to mortal sword of Drake, all of that seems to be tightly controlled by Krul. Now, the question I have is, I think the existence of the Chaos Warden allows for randomness and allows for maybe exercising free will, like Paran insists that he will. Like when he talks to Nigel, and I think he's wondering whether Nigel and her friends, who we know Kroll is one of them, if they made him master of the deck. But that seems to be due to an unrelated thing that happened, right? I don't think, did they even know about the fact that he went into Dragnipur and has the blood of the hounds in him? I think she wasn't privy to that information. So I think that element of it is random. And so now we have one aspect of the world that can be subject to free will, but a lot of it is not. So I think that there is free will in the sense that if there's not a god controlling all the things that you do. You can exercise your will, but at any given time, there could be one or more gods making things happen. And the way I'm reading this, what makes this world deterministic is that there are gods trying to make things happen a certain way, not that the world itself is super predictable and lacks free will, if that makes sense, which is a different dimension of, which is a different way of determinism than things just happen because one thing leads to another, and that's the only way it can go.
I think you've raised a lot of interesting points, some of which I agree with, some of which less so. I mean, what you ended there on, to me, it's like blatantly deterministic in that they predict the future and that future comes true. And there are not instances of them. There are times where they misunderstand something, a foretelling, but there's no like instance of an actual magical, they see the future and then that future doesn't come to pass. Like it just does happen. And so in that way, it's literally deterministic because it means the future is set in stone, even if they don't know how to accurately like tap into that.
So the counterpoint I have there is that the mechanism they use to tell the future is using the deck of dragons, which is basically at a high level talking about what each god wants or what each god is doing and what their players want to do, which I think still goes back to
Is that
the lack of free will comes. That's the one I know of. I'm trying to think. That's the main one that we've seen, right? Where all the prophecies come from. I'm trying to remember if there are other ways.
But
Fellison has a dream of blood. Like people have visions that indicate the future, and often in classic vision fashion, it's metaphorical. You know, it's a symbolic vision. But I mean, I'm with you. I hear what you're saying there, and I would agree with that. I think the deck of dragons is itself a kind of artificial construct that the tricky part though is now we have a master of the deck, and Perrin doesn't want to be the master of the deck, but he just is. And the question is he going to accept it and use it, or is he going to reject it and die? Like that's the stakes as they're presented to us. And in fact, we're even led to believe that those stakes are bullshit. And we know Perrin's going to accept it because the master of the deck does exist and he is going to be it. Like someone says that early on when like we're first introduced to the tension. It's just that like Perrin's just like dragging this out. Like it's going to happen. And I think in an interesting meta way, and this series is very concerned with like metafiction and you know the tropes and underlying stories and mythologies that it's playing with, that like that's kind of the whole like notion of a hero, right? I mean, you know, you're like inevitably, I guess this circles back to what, you know, Erikson is saying, they don't have free will, blah, 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 is like, well, it's a story. Like they do whatever the author makes them do, right? So in a very meta fictional sense, they have no free will. And likewise, the hero, right, is always going to do what the hero does. And so it's just really a matter of how long is it going to take before they accept that. And like, that's what Perrin is doing here, right? And he's literally giving him stomach ulcers, which is hysterical to me. I love it. It's such a visceral, like, ugh. He
has holes in his gut up there.
Yeah. And okay, I want to rewind to what you were saying earlier, though, Varsha, about cruel manipulating everything. And particularly the thing that really stood out to me is like an interesting observation you had was that like, did he pick Trake to rise, or did Trake just rise and he's making use of that? And I certainly, my initial thought based on reading was yours, which is that he picked it. But I don't know that we can, like, is he capable of doing that? Or is he playing with the kind of cards he's dealt? Like Trake is the natural successor, and so he's using, you know, manipulating things accordingly. Likewise, you know, I think the very question of like Gruntle, and this was something I was going to ask you guys before you even brought this up, Varsha, which is like, do we think Trake actually picked Gruntle, or did Gruntle step into the role on accident?
Or
did Karul pick him?
Yes,
right?
that, which is interesting, right? Like even the gods have limited free will apparently. I definitely think just circumstantially Krul had something to do with Gruntle's current role, and
Yeah.
and that means that Krul is controlling the creation of a new god and his priesthood, in as much as you can call Gruntle a priest of anything, but he's choosing for the humans and for the gods.
To what end? I mean, we
That's a
kind of
good
know. He
question.
kind of lays out his motivation here, but this is something I'm very curious to read with the larger story. Karul in general, but where his machinations go. Because if he's aiming a gun and firing it, like it may take a while for that bullet to hit, but you know, he may have these larger plans. And I think there is the question too of, does he see the future? Right? Like I don't know that he's like a 5-dimensional being, I'm pretty sure.
He created space-time, so he kind of has to be.
Did he?
He was there before. He created the rent and darkness that created the first Warren, and then the rest of the Warrens came from his body and his
that's a
blood.
myth.
Well, then
Because
somebody,
the Chain Kamal existed before all of them. And so presumably, like
before
I get
the
the sense like
gods?
the Chain Shamal might have existed before the Elder Gods, or certainly some of the Elder Gods. Karul would be my big question, but it's also hard to talk about without talking about Carcanus. But I'm not sure it's that cut and dry. And I don't know. It's interesting. Certainly, he I think he has at least some capacity to see the future.
And manipulate it, I think. I'm pretty sure. Because Silver Fox also was his doing. Everything.
Yeah.
And
yes,
they are,
yeah.
and it all seems to have something to do with the crippled god, because we know the Panian domain is being manipulated by the crippled god. We also know this. Well, I don't think we know that. But when I think we do. When sorry, I'm getting to the thing that we probably in chapter 17 when he kills Rath Fenner and not kills, cuts his hand off. The hands are supposed to be taken by Fenner, but Fenner is obviously not in his realm, so they are taken over by someone else, and that someone else is the crippled god. And he could have just, randomly been passing by and the hands ended up with him, or because the Panian domain is being manipulated by the crippled god, that's the god that the hands went to, because he betrayed his people to the Panian domain, right? So all of this seems to be some massive mobilization against the crippled god, which Krul is heavily involved in.
What's interesting, I mean, he is like seemingly, he seemingly cares for humanity and like life in general. But I mean, if you think about it, one, he's really callous in how he manipulates people and throws, like Talk the Younger, for example, into a terrible situation. But two, why is he fighting the crippled god? Because the crippled god is killing the Warrens, and if the Warrens die, Krul dies, because he is the Warrens.
Yeah.
And so in some ways, it's just self-preservation. And he's just, doing like, it's almost like a chess game between these two gods. I think that's overly simplistic. I think there's more forces at work, not least like Shadow Throne and Cotillion and, the Malazan Empire. Like there's all sorts of forces at work here. But particularly in this book, it does kind of feel like it's like two chess masters using all the pieces on the board. And those chess masters are Karul and the crippled god. And not so coincidentally, they both wear like hooded robes and we never see their face. They're very mysterious. They're like all the dudes on all the fantasy covers from 10 years ago.
Oh, and here's the other thing. The the thing that's poisoning Burn herself and presumably the Warrens is chaos in some form, right? Which means that chaos is inimical to Cruel. So he stands for order in some form. Like he
Yep.
needs and cares about order. So that, I think that's more evidence that he can predict the future. I mean, I think he can manipulate it, so he knows what's happening, which is why Paran is such an interesting element here, because he was made by chaos, his master of deckness, because of the hounds, and so he can make random decisions that Cruel maybe could not account for.
I mean, we'll see.
Maybe that's where all
We'll
the free will comes from chaos. Maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
I definitely think that if you're to make like a mechanical metaphysical argument about free will in this universe, I think chaos is at the center of it, right? That it is that imposition of chaos upon order that gives people a chance to make a choice. But I don't know. Shannon, this is your chapter. We've been having a lot of metaphysical discussions, but what do you want to say about the gray swords and shit? All the awesome shit that happens.
Oh, you guys are having a great discussion. I mean, yeah, I don't know, man. Gray swords were awesome, and Brucalion and Carnidus die. And Ikovian is mostly next chapter is really good stuff talking about him. But I just thought this chapter was what was hold on. The first line of this chapter I thought was really grabbed me. Because it talked about the Tenascari rose like an inexorable flood against every wall of the city. Rose and swept over a mass of humanity driven mad by hunger. Gate barricades buckled to the pressure. They then gave way, and Capustan drowned. And I thought that was just a great setup to this chapter. Like as we see the end result of this flood of cannibals that have flooded through the city. Let me think.
You on the forum mentioned that like a lot of the imagery you remember from the book is from this chapter, and I had the same experience. It's like this chapter and the Kachane Chamal Kel hunters on the plains were like many of the like iconic images in my brain when I think of Memories of Ice.
Yeah, one of the things I most remembered from the whole book was that Gruntle building that he took over, because at the beginning you see him fighting and they're kind of slowly backing up as the Tenascari are taking over the building, and then later on we see how the building is just like chocked full and like blood is coming out of cracks and stuff because the bodies are bloating inside of it because it's just so full of bodies, and it's just like, this is insane.
Yeah, it's anime shit. I can't believe that Erikson is like really hesitant about like an animated adaptation, because I don't think you could pull this series off as anything other than animation. I mean, Gruntle has got to pull off like truly insane feats. You know, he's got to be freaking, like in anime, it's like it's easy. Like he's like doing like, you know, samurai shit, like teleporting around and like slicing people up. But like in real life, it would be really hard to like make his abilities, you know, seem reasonable.
Gruntle in through this book, and especially this chapter, maybe, he's right out of like Dragon Ball Z. I mean, you can almost see his like hair raising with the energy as he just like jumps forward and just starts taking out everybody.
You're spot on, exactly.
I mean, it also makes no like the house like a solid mass of bodies makes no sense. Because once the entrances are blocked, sort of, you can't, unless you're pushing them in on purpose, you wouldn't be able to fill it completely.
You also have
for whatever reason.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, I was going to say, for whatever reason, just in the same way as, you know, back in Memories of Ice, we got introduced to a sword that can steal people's souls and strap them to a carriage, running through the underworld. Like, I just kind of roll with it. Like, I'm just like, this is insane. It makes no sense, but I love it. Like, I just eat it up. It's absurd, but like, Erikson makes me believe it in a way.
A similar sort of thing for me is like Idkovian on his horse atop like a whole square of bodies, and they're not just like on the ground, like they piled up. And not only have they piled up, and he's fighting atop all the bodies, which is ludicrous, but then people climb out from underneath the bodies to fight with him again, and it's the big heroic like moment there. And I on top of Carnatus, or not Carnatus, Brucalion showing up with the cavalry, and I just, it's so insane. It's just, this series like really just does it all. Like the most insane imagery you've ever seen, and then like philosophical conversations about like the nature of existence, not even human existence, but like all of existence, and then like fucking Krupp running around with his sweet cakes. It does it all.
Interwoven with some random necromancy.
Yes.
I mean, this chapter was the most like zombie-like sort of Tezcaro of all of them, especially like even that section when the Malazan are coming and they all rise up from the field. Basically, it's literally zombies.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah, it was very.
And I really liked in this chapter when Wrath Fenner, who Carl, you're not a fan of, summons Brucalion, and it's like they know they're going to their deaths, but they still go to it. And just that last big fight, and then I think it was the arrows, like just coming out of the sky at him, which was just great imagery.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
And then counter to all this. Yeah, and then counter to all this fighting and everything, also we get Buke, and he this is the chapter where he turns into a sparrowhawk, and it's just like all of this just insanity and brutality and awfulness has caused him to just kind of turn into this sparrowhawk and fly away. And I really liked, and this is kind of jumping to the end of the next chapter, but those lines where it's like he's flying away. And specifically, it says the man that was Buke, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, it gives you this idea that maybe he's not even Buke anymore. Like, he's all this carnage, all this awfulness has caused him to just become this bird and fly away. And it's made me kind of.
It's not just that; it's the actual transformation itself. We've seen it happen. It happened with. It happens to the shapeshifters. Like it happened to Trake. Who had
I was going to say at the beginning of this book, it talked about Trake, how he had given into the tiger long ago.
Yep.
And so I like that he so quickly just gives into the bird, and he's just, and it's all this awful stuff we heard about Buke in his past and everything. It's nice to think that at the end he just flies away. He's a bird, and he's happy. Maybe the only happy thing to come out of this city.
I think it is mentioned some other point about the shapeshifters that if you're not careful, you get lost in the shape-shifting shape. Like that's what happened with Trake, right? He just got lost in the animal side, right?
Shannon and I both separately said that, Dan.
Oh, really? I missed that.
Yeah. Yes. You were too busy in your shape-shifted form.
Well, distracted by things falling down.
What would you all be if you were to shapeshift into an animal?
Into an animal? I don't know. It's kind of cool to be like a swarm, though. So like diverse.
Depends what you're a swarm of. I wouldn't want to be a bug. Swarm of bugs, that's gross.
I don't know. Ants are pretty cool.
But if you are the bug, you wouldn't feel like it's gross, but you'll gross everyone else out, and that could be pretty cool.
Yeah. Be a swarm of spiders.
Oh God, no. I have arachnophobia. Couldn't be me.
Ooh, spiders.
Well, but if you are the spider, well, how can you?
No.
Yeah, why would you be afraid
himself out?
God.
Nope.
No.
That actually sounds like a good story. Now that we're talking about it, like it could be like a fun short story. It's like the guy who's scared of spiders who like gets turned into a spider. Like, can you even imagine the mind fuck of that?
That'd be.
You
You
retain
know what,
your
Carl?
consciousness?
Maybe you should write that story.
I'm taking notes.
And take
It's just
notes.
similar like the Kafka story. What's it called? Right, but he becomes a cockroach.
Metamorphosis?
Metamorphosis. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
haven't read Kafka.
Mm.
Well, I would be
not
some
yet.
sort of animal that can bound around or
Kangaroo.
fly. Probably fly. I think I'd like to be a
Wow.
bird.
I mean, part of you wants to say like a chimpanzee or something might be fun,
That could
but
be fun.
at the same time, I want to kind of be a basic bitch and just be like, of course, a dragon. You know, be one of the soul taking
Well,
dragons.
okay, yeah. If the dragon is on the table, obviously you pick the dragon. The dragon does it all.
You know.
I mean, yeah, I'm with you on that. If dragon's on the table, dragon all day long, in like period into sentence.
I feel being an octopus would be pretty
But
cool.
Yes.
octopus.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do like
You're
seafood.
just working your way down Tchaikovsky's series, right?
Oh,
That's
yeah,
what you're
true.
doing.
Very true.
What was the third one? You'll pick a raven next, I suppose.
Oh, raven. Yeah. Well, you
Ravens are
can
cool.
communicate if you're a raven. Much better, right?
That's true.
Or a parrot.
Mm.
Ooh, a
An
parrot would be
octopus, you
fun.
can manipulate things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to be a panther like Kilava.
I respect that.
Okay.
Panther would be high up
Right
there
on.
too.
Mhm.
Jungle cat like that. Yeah, absolutely.
But I thought panthers were just melanistic leopards or something. I don't remember.
Mm.
Well, I mean, yes,
Cool
and
regard. So they
Interesting.
look cooler, and they
You're right.
behave coolly, like the. What was the name of the panther in Jungle Book? Bagheera.
Ah.
No, that was that.
Yeah, that's it.
Bagheera.
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 Bagheera. Yeah.
yeah, she
Yeah.
rocks.
Mhm.
She
Mhm.
rocks.
Wait, Bagheera's female?
Yeah.
Sounds like a male name. But...
No, she's.
Oh,
no,
actually,
no.
it was a male.
All right.
What's the tiger's name?
What? Wait, was it in the
Really?
live action
The
remake
tiger.
that it was a woman, or am I making that up?
I mean, I know in the cartoon he was voiced by a male.
Maybe
Oh,
I'm
true.
making-
He is a male. Yeah. He looks.
do
I mean, he looks like a male in the cartoon. Now that I
Yeah.
looked at it.
Yeah, the Sher
Yeah.
Khan. Sher is
Yeah.
tiger,
Yeah.
right?
Maybe I'm
Shere
thinking.
Khan
the
is
tiger.
the tiger.
Yeah, Sher Khan.
This is the kind
it
of
like-
insight that people listen to us for. All five
Yeah.
of our fans.
But in my mind, all panthers are
Fans
female.
might be
Like,
going a bit
panthers
far.
is- I don't know.
All five of our hate listeners.
Oh no.
Okay, so I had a couple of things to say about this chapter. One, I thought my recollection of all the gruntal action was getting it firsthand, but pretty much all of it we got is from information that Ikovian got, or from looking at the aftermath of what he did, which is amazing. The impression that it made on me with just getting information about the after effects of what he did, right? Especially the building thing with the cops is just like overflowing to a point where the building's getting cracks. That's insane. The second thing, I don't think we've brought it up yet, Itkovian and the first child of the seed, which the epigraph of this chapter is about too. And it prepares you for that, which I love. Dare you step behind his eyes even for a moment? That's a question it asks over and over again in that poem at the beginning in the epigraph. And then Itkovian makes this declaration that he's gonna help that kid out one way or another. He's getting embraced. And and this doesn't happen often, but I love how the epigraph of the next chapter sort of dovetailed on the ending of this chapter, because he says Yeah, we will meet him again. I am his only salvation, sir, and I shall not fail him. And then he says, I will hold it all, for we are not yet done. Because he's the shield anvil. And then the epigraph of the next chapter is what the soul can house, flesh cannot fathom. And we know what happens in this chapter. So it's just, I love the way this all just weaves into the next thing. We're still building, by the way. Like we stopped at a place that where pretty big things happen. But I think we're not done yet. Obviously, we're a little past the midpoint of the book. But yeah, I just love this entire sequence. I think, Carl, before we started recording, you were talking about how this was one of the sections where Itkovian started to stand out for you. And man, I the first time I found the three priests, or like the keepers of Fenner's temple, priesthood, whatever, so boring to read about. Not exactly, but like they really grew on me over time.
Yeah.
But the the fast pace in which that happens in just this chapter, right? Because Karnadas and Itkovian makes a lot of sacrifices by the end of this chapter, but Karnadas just gives up his life. He could potentially have chosen to not heal people, but he does knowing what it's going to cost him. Brukalian heads out to accept, I guess, the charge that he's given by Rathfenner, knowing that he's being betrayed, knowing that he's not going to come out of it alive. And then Itkovian makes this declaration that he's not done and he's going to do so much more. He needs to hold it on. And he says multiple times in chapter 17 that he has not yielded and he shall not yield. That's a word that keeps coming up. So all three of them, I think it's really interesting that this cult of a god of war, the leaders of it, have all made such big sacrifices, and that adds to what they say about how you must fight wars and not treat it like a game. I think there's a quote in chapter 17 about that, but it was just brilliant how all of it came together.
Similarly, like for me, I mean, I ditto everything you just said there. It is such a unique and powerful concept to have one of the core figures of a cult of war, his power to be channeling grief. Yeah. Like that is so natural, but it is not something like when you see gods of war and cults of war, often they're very one-dimensional, and often, frankly, negative aspected. And maybe they get they're honorable, they follow the rules, but dealing with the grief and holding on to that grief is just powerful. And that Itkovian, like, he doesn't even hesitate. Like, he just like reaches out to take everyone's grief wherever he goes, his enemies, his friends, whoever. And I mean, it's a powerful scene with Anaster. Anaster is like definitely another tragic character who you're like, he never had a chance. Like, you cannot be the first like zombie rape baby growing up in a cult of death and like come out all right. Like, you're gonna be pretty messed up. And yeah, I mean, it's a poem. It's not from his perspective, but the epigraph of chapter 16. This kid never had a father, right? And 100% some part of him craves that. Like, there's 100%. And especially knowing what happened to his birth father. And it's just, there's this intense sadness inside of him. And as I think Itkovian says, like, all he is despair. Otherwise, he would be nothing at all. I mean, that explains why this is what he can do. He can commit these atrocities because it's just all he knows. Despair. It's really great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. The ascendancy of Itkovian as one of my favorite characters.
Yes, I love Itkovian.
Yeah. And after that, extremely heavy moment and this extremely heavy epigraph, even though it's just one line long. We get sorry, give me one moment. Yeah, so we get the bridge burners coming to Kapistan and declaring themselves. There's a lot of fun moments there before things get hot there too.
Yeah, y'all are gonna have to take over here. I did not read this chapter, so
Yeah. I mean, this chapter it's just a chapter where they all go to the thrall and they have, I don't know, like a big chat, basically, at the thrall. I think so. Well, this is, I mean, some of the stuff it was, or was the previous chapter with Itkovian?
both had
Because
it.
you guys were discussing the Itkovian being like, Shield Anvil and taking everyone's, what do I say, grief. But does this happen in the previous chapter or in this chapter?
Both chapters. Both chapters,
Okay.
the Kobian does that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is this the chapter in which, how do I say, like they cut the hands of Raph Fenner?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was very cool. Like I like, I don't know, it had a bit of that Eldritch feel when they cut his hands and they're like, oh, your god is not here anymore. So it's some like entity from outside, some monster from outside the realm, from chaos, that's basically took possession of his soul, right? Or his hands, actually.
It's the crippled
Yeah.
god, though.
Well, is it? I thought it was.
Is it?
I thought
Yeah,
it was just some random equivalent of, like, because there's many sort of these alien beings floating in the chaos outside the order of the universe. I thought it was just another one of those.
Pretty sure it's the crippled god. I mean, that's like
Yeah.
his whole thing. I mean, it definitely alludes to that, but also,
Hmm.
okay, I say having only just read the chapter summary before jumping on, so I could talk remotely about any of this.
Okay.
But like, you think about it, like he's the crippled god. He
Yes.
is attaching himself to all these cripples, including notably another handless priest of Finner in the last book. I mean, we didn't know what was going on then, but the Jade statue shit, and it's this battle now within him that he is now connected to the crippled god in some fashion, and we're seeing the same thing happen here, I think.
Because I thought it was like, because it says, when they cut his hands, in theory, the weave is supposed to, you cut your hands and then the hands go to the Fenner's Warren, right? And I thought they said in this chapter, like, there's no more, like, your god is not in the Warren now, so there's no one left there, but it's like starting to get occupied by other forms. But I could imagine, like, because the crippled god is sort of infecting all the Warrens, that the crippled god was the one that was taking over. So I can see it that way. I just thought that if it was the crippled god, it would have been more explicitly said. That's what I thought.
I think it's heavily implied. This is the part that made me think that it is. When he says, and maybe this is why you thought it was a random alien presence, but the alien presence recoiled, but it was too late. When he says, even gods weep, commend yourself then to my spirit, I will have your pain as well, sir. Because that Itkovian starts to embrace the creature that took over the hands, right? And then he sees horror and then grief.
Yeah, but I thought it was.
Entity.
No, I get what you're saying. I just thought if it was like, because it seemed like this presence was also surprised. It's kind of like it was existing, and then it's got these hands, and it wasn't even trying to be like, no, like, because I think it said, the way it said, it's like
a gift, yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't trying to torture this person. It seemed like he was just trying to basically analyze, see like what's going on. He didn't know what he was doing. That's how I read that part, and that's why I thought that it was. I don't know. and then he,
I
from
think
some other universe, and then he was sort of like taking the grief from this other universe of, completely alien but still like relatable in that sense.
Which is what the crippled god is, to be clear.
Yeah, true. He's one of those. I
He's
just thought it was
literally
a different one.
Yeah, he's literally like an eldritch force on this
Yes.
planet. Like he comes from outside the universe. He's literally an alien, not even just extraterrestrial. He's extra dimensional, extra universal, and
True.
he is filled with pain. Right? Like that's the whole premise of him. Is he is an embodiment of pain, and because he's filled with so much pain, he's been forced into this position. He is now lashing out like the Maib and trying to kill everything, basically.
Fair enough.
I think this is interesting, right? Assuming it's the cripple god, we have been led so far to believe, or all the characters that we meet so far think him evil, and they need to fight him, and there's just been a lot of negativity, and we didn't meet him also when he was being a total jerk to Quickpen and a few others, but here he seems to have been caught in not vulnerable moment. He became vulnerable after this, but in unguarded, that's the word I want, in an unguarded moment, and you see what's really going on. There's horror, there's grief, there's anguish, and Itkovian may have helped with some of it seems like. So if anything happens with the cripple god that's nice after this, Itkovian might have had something to do with it, maybe.
Yeah, I guess if we're gonna see in the next books probably, I guess, if Itkovian did something, because if it did something, then he would have basically taken his grief, and then he would have a little bit cured the cripple god in a sense.
I think we know now that he tore through some of the layers, but the whatever it was pulled away before he could get too deep. Yeah,
True.
he says he was lost within the storm, his embrace incapable of closing around the sheer immensity of anguish assailing him, yet he struggled on, the gift of peace, stripping away of pain's trauma. And it goes on, but it seems he probably barely made a dent, but he tried.
It's a god, right? Like he's not going to be able to cut through all that or embrace it, as the metaphor were.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's not explicitly mentioned, but we do know that the cripple god has been referenced as alien. So that's where I went by default. I don't know what I thought the first time, but this makes sense now. But also I loved that Itkovian tried to embrace the guy he punished so severely, and that person knew what he was doing and tried to stop him. He says, and Itkovian, in the act of embracing him, says, I now understand you, I comprehend you now, Rathfener, but comprehension is not synonymous with absolution, which is really important.
Yeah. It's a very real idea that we all, that's real world shit right there.
Mm-hmm.
We all have to grapple with that.
Yeah.
Well, some people on the forums are divided if it's the cripple god or not. That's what I...
There you go.
Yeah, it's fair. I think it works just as much if it's a random entity, right? For the purpose of that scene. We'll know if there's some build-up from here in the later books that has some fallout if it's for the cripple god.
Yeah.
But I think it also works if it's a random entity. But the cripple god makes sense too, I think, based on some other stuff that I know about him.
It does, I think, work as a random entity with the word. I mean, I again saying only having skimmed the scene now to like know exactly what we're talking about. But I do think at least in my mind, this is subjective, but in my mind, the more interesting version is it's the crippled god, because like, yeah, of course it's him. Like, he reaches out, like he's looking for new acolytes. He's, and it tells you something about him, that Ikovian is reaching out to this immense storm of grief and pain and horror that he can't wrap his arms around.
Yeah. And yes, I think I agree that makes it more interesting because of the opposing view we get now, right? Because we start to build compassion or sympathy for the crippled god, or comprehension. I think that's the right word to use here. Comprehension for the crippled god, because he's just lashing out in pain, much like Felicin, for whom also I think we talked over and over again about comprehension, not giving her absolution for some of the shit she does, but we're trying to understand and wrap our heads around it.
Right.
Are we ready to move on to quotes? Anything else from this chapter?
I don't remember what else happens in this chapter.
I think my favorite bit before the Itkovian stuff was, I forget who it was. Was it Hedge saying, "Hello, Kapistan, the bridge burners have what? Have arrived."
I guess
Yeah.
there's also that whole section with Grunthal talking with Raph Drake, right?
Oh yeah. Yes.
Which is kind of funny.
Yeah. There was and I love when Humbril Tor, he says, "Your gods are inside, you can move on." Paran tells him, "I'm gonna have a chat with these guys." and Humbril Tor is like, I would witness, and he's like, "Nosy bastard."
I mean, it seems interesting. I would
Yeah.
listen to.
Yeah, for sure.
I wouldn't do it so blatantly, but more power to him. I was like, I'm gonna stand here even though you told me to get up.
I mean, it was the way it was set up. It was like in this
Yeah.
plaza with the dead and
That's
like all
true.
these rafts on one side and everyone converging. I was like, yeah, I'll see what happens.
Things are getting interesting. I want to stay and watch. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess Grunthal wants to stay as a caravan guard and be Immortal Sword as a hobby.
Yes. Oh yeah. Hobby. I love how he kept scandalizing Rathtrek. She, right? Yeah, she tried to keep controlling him, telling him what to do. And he's like, "Nope, this is just a hobby. I'm going back to being a caravan guard."
Yeah. But I mean, that would make sense too, just like the other guys were mercenaries, which is not a huge difference from a caravan guard, to be honest.
That is true. That's true.
So I'm sure he'll find a lot of fights being a caravan guard too, if that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, because it is the god of war, right? They just care about how many fights they pick, sort of.
I guess so. I don't know.
Probably do. That's probably part of their personality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you can't be like a barmaid or something.
Yeah. It would suck to be just like drafted into one of those positions. Like that would actually be terrible. To just like a god is like, yeah, you're my mortal sword now. By the way, you're the mortal sword of the god of war. So have fun for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And it's like, but I was an accountant.
Exactly. That's a Terry Pratchett novel right there.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
I guess we don't know if there's a mortal sword for every god, though. If it's just a god of war.
God of war.
Not. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it's just a god of war sort of thing.
We do know they have like knights or like blades, like, because we know Dasimultor was like resurrected the notion of like knights of the, or is it knight or blade, first sword of specific houses. And that's what the mortal sword, I believe, is like the equivalent of that.
But can you be a first sword? You're a first sword when you're alive, not when you're dead.
Right. And Dasimultor was that when he was alive.
Yeah, because it's different from being like the High King of House Death or something, like the kings at like those positions. It's a different thing, right?
Well, it's in the pantheon in a way. I don't know,
Yeah.
man.
I don't know.
Maybe each god decides what positions they have.
Maybe.
And yeah.
That would be more fun. Every god decides how to do his own thing.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yes. I will have singer and dancer for when I am god.
I mean, I'm sure if a god of chance would have both positions, probably, right?
Yeah.
You
I could
say
see
that,
them
but
having
apparently
that.
it's just those two doofuses, and they just like jump around. They don't do anything. Like if I was them, I would have a lot of fun, but instead they're just causing problems.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe they do. I mean, I've heard like up
True.
until this book, like everyone is saying, oh, you know, they're all dead. They don't exist anymore, all these roles. So maybe they do exist for other gods too. We're just not common knowledge.
Yeah. That makes sense. People just don't know. We are getting all the full magical experience of this world, right? But most people in this world barely even know that magic is a thing. They mostly just believe that their gods exist. They
I
haven't
want to
seen them
believe there's
walking
so many
around.
things the protagonists also don't know in this world that also exist.
That's true.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
I mean, that is true. Some of them don't, but oh well. Quotes?
Honestly, we said my big quotes, which were the epigraphs.
Yeah, I think we got mine too. But I think this one from Buke, there was pain in the gifts of the elder gods, but sometimes there was mercy.
I had that one down too.
Sorry.
Yes. No, that's fine. Let me see if I had another one.
A lot of Vitkovian's parts were very
Yes.
quotable.
All
Yeah.
his monologues were. And yeah, every time he said, I have not yielded or I shall not yield or whatever the actual quote was brilliant.
Yeah. That's the sort of stuff that it's like makes me think like would I be able to say that in that situation, or would I say something way less cool and then think much later? You know?
I'm just blabbering. I'm not I can barely string sentences together during normal times, let alone when bad things are happening.
Yeah, I am for sure making really inappropriate jokes in
Yeah.
those instances. I can tell you, I'm the guy who like is like leaning over to like a family member and making a bad joke at a funeral. It's a problem. I've gotten in trouble before.
Yeah, I just wonder how many of those famous quotes from people in history were rearranged later to sound cooler.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure some of them I'm sure were made up wholesale.
Wasn't
Yeah.
there a quotable quote from someone who said, I never said that? That was the quote.
Possibly.
I mean, I think that's just a joke, but I forget who
Yeah.
they put it on. Maybe Einstein. I don't know.
Oh no, it's that meme of like something like don't believe everything you read on the internet. And then there's a quote of Isaac Newton saying that.
Yeah. Or I think
seen
I've
that,
seen that
yeah.
for Buddha also.
Or whatever, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Any other quotes?
I think I'm good.
Okay, then if you're still here, thank you so much for listening. And if you quit partway, thank you for listening, although you wouldn't
That's
hear
right.
it.
We don't fully appreciate you if you don't listen all the way through. You get 50% of our appreciation.
Well, no, whatever percentage you listen to, that's the percentage of appreciation.
True,
No,
true,
50%. But yeah, we will see you next week with the next two chapters, which are chapters 18 and 19. And yeah, if you'd like to talk about this book with us, please consider checking out the pagechewing forum. That's where we do a lot of offline discussions. The online discussion here is a little full because of the apps we use for recording, but we've got a thing going for RSVP. If we do have spots any week, we'll keep that updated. I haven't been doing a good job of that for the last 3 weeks, although I think we didn't know until the last moment that people weren't coming. So yeah, please look out for all of those. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye.